Hello and welcome. This is a calm, thoughtful exploration of one of the most mysterious unsolved cases in modern European history. You're listening to a true crime story told slowly, softly, and without disturbing imagery, perfect for falling asleep, relaxing, or simply letting your mind wander. There is no visual stimulation in this video. Just a black screen and a quiet voice guiding you through a real-life case that continues to haunt investigators and the public alike. If you find peace in calm storytelling, consider subscribing. New long-form episodes are released regularly, focused on European cases, always respectful and deeply researched. Now take a deep breath. Get comfortable. Let the noise of the day fade away. Tonight, we tell the story of Xavier Dupont de Ligonnès, a man born into nobility, admired for his faith, respected for his intelligence, and suspected of something unimaginable. In early April 2011, something strange began happening around Nantes. The children of the Dupont de Ligonnès family stopped showing up at school. Teachers received sudden notices of withdrawal. Friends got messages saying the family had moved to Australia for a new job opportunity. Their pets were given away. Furniture was removed from the home. To outsiders, it seemed like a well-organized departure. But there were signs that something was off. The family car remained parked in the driveway. The father, Xavier Dupont de Ligonnès, was seen around town for a few more days, at restaurants, hotels, and on security cameras. He looked calm. Alone. Then, he too vanished. And on April 13th, police entered the house at 55 Boulevard Robert Schumann, looking for answers. What they found was eerie silence. No struggle. No signs of chaos. Just an empty house, and something buried beneath the garden. On April 13th, 2011, police entered the quiet home at 55 Boulevard Robert Schumann in Nantes, western France. Inside, they found order, not chaos. Beds were made. Dishes clean. There were no broken objects, no blood, no mess. Just silence. But something wasn't right. Religious items had been removed from the walls. Family photos were missing. A note on the mailbox said the house should no longer receive mail. It all felt staged. Still, there was no sign of violence, and no sign of the family either. It wasn't until April 21st, 8 days later, that officers returned with a team of forensics and a cadaver dog. The dog alerted near the back terrace, a small gravel area behind the house. Underneath, investigators found a shallow grave, covered in lime, wrapped in plastic. They uncovered the bodies of the mother, and the 4 children, Arthur, Thomas, Anne, and Benoit. Each had been drugged and shot with a .22 caliber rifle, the same model owned by Xavier Dupont de Ligonnès. Their bodies were carefully laid together, with personal objects, like rosary beads and family photographs, placed beside them. 2 of the family's pet dogs were buried nearby. The scene didn't suggest rage. It suggested ritual. Friends and extended family were devastated. The discovery sent shockwaves across France. How could a family so admired, so seemingly perfect, end up like this? Only one person was missing from the grave. The father. And now, investigators faced the terrifying possibility that Xavier hadn't been murdered, but that he was the killer. After the bodies were discovered, French authorities moved fast. On April 22, 2011, an international arrest warrant was issued for Xavier Dupont de Ligonnès. He was no longer a missing person. He was a fugitive suspected of murdering his entire family. Investigators began retracing his steps. Between April 11th and April 15th, Xavier had been spotted traveling south through France, using ATMs, sleeping in cheap hotels, and always alone. In each place he paid in cash. There were no signs of panic, only quiet, methodical movement. Security cameras captured him in cities like Rorschach and Toulon. In one video, he walks calmly through a parking garage, glances at the camera, and disappears from view. This would become the last confirmed footage of him. His car, a blue Citroën C5, was later found abandoned near a cliffside in the Massif des Moors, a rugged forested area near the Mediterranean. Inside, police found his rifle case, but no weapon. Despite a massive manhunt involving helicopters, dogs, and drones, Xavier was never found. The area is vast, with caves, gorges, and thick vegetation. Authorities considered the possibility that he might have taken his own life, but no body was ever discovered. Meanwhile, media coverage exploded. Photos of Xavier in a suit and tie were plastered on news outlets across Europe. Friends and former colleagues were interviewed. Some were shocked. Others said they noticed something off in recent months, a kind of quiet unraveling. As the manhunt stalled, the mystery grew. How could a man with no criminal history, no signs of violence, and a deep devotion to Catholicism, kill his entire family and vanish without a trace? Some believed he had died in the mountains. Others believed he had escaped, and was watching from afar. As investigators dug into Xavier Dupont de Ligonnès' past, a different man began to emerge, one far from the polished image of a Catholic aristocrat and devoted family man. He was born in 1961 into an old noble lineage, with deep ties to French aristocracy. He held the title of Count, though in modern France, such titles are mostly symbolic. His father, Hugh Dupont de Ligonnès, was eccentric and distant. His mother, devoutly religious, raised Xavier with strong Catholic values and an obsession with appearances and status. On the outside, Xavier seemed successful. He was charming, educated, fluent in English, had lived in the U.S., and ran several businesses. But behind closed doors, things were falling apart. Most of his ventures had failed. By 2011, he was drowning in debt. His businesses were collapsing. He was borrowing money from friends, dodging creditors, and desperately trying to maintain the image of success. At home, he was increasingly withdrawn. Friends noticed that he had become obsessed with religion and the idea of redemption. He would speak about starting over, protecting his family, and sometimes referenced the honor of dying together. But perhaps the most shocking discovery came from Xavier's private life. He had a long-running affair with a woman, whom he visited regularly. He told her that he was a CIA agent, that he had to fake his identity, and that one day they would disappear together. She believed him. He also told her that his family would soon be gone, that they would vanish from public life. In hindsight, these were chilling words. Detectives now believed the murders were premeditated. He had withdrawn the children from school, telling staff they were moving to Australia. He told neighbors the same story. He cancelled the family's phone lines. Everything was done with precision. This wasn't a sudden outburst. It was a plan. After Xavier Dupont de Ligonnès vanished, theories began to multiply, not just among investigators, but in the public imagination as well. How could a man disappear so completely in a country as monitored as France? Some believed he had died shortly after abandoning his car in the Massif des Moors. The terrain is wild and difficult. If he had taken his own life, His body could still be hidden among the cliffs or forest. But after weeks of searching, including thermal imaging, dogs, and local patrols, no trace of him was ever found. Not even his DNA. Others were convinced that he had escaped. A few claimed he had fled to Italy by foot, or boarded a boat along the Mediterranean coast. One report suggested he may have used a false identity and had help from a Catholic network that aids people seeking new lives in secrecy, though this was never confirmed. Then came the sightings. He was allegedly seen in Canada, Switzerland, and Thailand. In 2016, a man matching his description was spotted at a monastery in southern France, living among monks under a false name. Police raided the location, but the man was not Xavier. The most dramatic incident occurred in 2019, when a man traveling from Scotland to Ireland was arrested at the Glasgow airport. Authorities believed he matched Xavier's facial features and fingerprints. The media went wild. Had the ghost finally been caught? But after several days of testing, it turned out to be a case of mistaken identity. The man was Guy Joao, a retired tech worker from Portugal. He was released. The trail was cold once again. To this day, none of the sightings have ever been confirmed. And the deeper question remains, if Xavier is alive, how does a man with such a distinctive face, such a known case, live in hiding for over a decade? Or, more disturbingly, did he have help? From the start, Xavier Dupont de Ligonnès was believed to have acted alone. There was no physical evidence pointing to accomplices, no fingerprints, no third-party DNA, no strange calls or transactions. But over time, cracks appeared in that theory. For one, the murders required planning and physical effort. The 5 bodies were carefully wrapped, buried under the garden terrace, and covered in quicklime, a substance used to slow decomposition. Digging that space, preparing the burial, and hiding the evidence would have taken hours. Could Xavier have done all of this by himself, in total silence, without help? Then there were the logistics. Xavier stayed in hotels for several nights while traveling. He was recorded calmly walking alone, eating alone, checking in under his real name. But some wondered, was someone following him in a separate car? Providing money? Watching his back? Family members and friends were questioned, especially those close to him through religious or aristocratic circles. A few were notably evasive during interviews. One priest, who had spiritual contact with Xavier, refused to testify publicly. This fueled speculation about a secret network helping him disappear, possibly for religious or ideological reasons. And what about the letters? Several weeks after the murders, Xavier's relatives received typed letters, postmarked from southern France. In them, he claimed that he and his family had entered witness protection, that the children were safe, and that no one should look for them. The tone was calm, rational. He even included details that only he could have known. Experts debated whether the letters were real, written by Xavier himself, or planted by someone else to confuse the investigation. There was no ransom, no confession, no suicide note. Just silence, and a perfect vanishing act. If he had help, the question remains, who would risk everything to protect a man accused of murdering his own children? Shortly after the bodies were discovered, several typed letters began arriving for relatives of Xavier Dupont de Ligonnès. Dated April 11th, they were addressed to schools, neighbors, friends, even sisters and in-laws. In them, he claimed that he had been secretly working with the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, and that the family had to disappear for their protection. He explained that they had entered the U.S. Federal Witness Protection Program, living under assumed identities in a warm country with no contact allowed. He even asked recipients to spread the story on social media, to reinforce the narrative and delay any worries. One letter told relatives, "Please do not go near the patio," referring to the grave in the garden. Another warned that any attempt to investigate further could endanger their safety. Photos accompanied some letters. Images of Arthur and Benoit sitting at a kitchen table, stamped with a handwritten message, "I am still alive," on the back. The tone of the letters was calm, logical, almost soothing. Some experts believe this was calculated to buy time, to direct suspicion elsewhere, to introduce confusion into the investigation. But others warn that the letters, though consistent in tone, could have been forged by an accomplice, or even by a third party seeking to manipulate the narrative. What's clear is that these letters prove one thing: Xavier had planned ahead and understood public perception. He wasn't acting on impulse, he was shaping the story. Yet, despite the letters and the photos, no trace of the family in a warm country was ever found. And many now believe the photos and letters were meant to mislead, not reassure. As investigators worked through fingerprint and DNA testing on the letters and envelopes, the trail grew colder and more mysterious. But by now, the world had seen him as not just a killer, but a master manipulator. As the case of Xavier Dupont de Ligonnès unfolded, France was gripped by a mix of horror, disbelief, and morbid fascination. The media quickly turned the quiet street at 55 Boulevard Robert Schumann into a spotlighted crime scene. Cameras surrounded the house, journalists speculated live, and neighbors were interviewed repeatedly, many in shock. Television programs ran hour-long specials, newspapers published front-page stories, and websites received millions of clicks with every update. But the coverage wasn't always respectful. Some media outlets focused on the aristocratic origins of Xavier, portraying the family as elegant and religious, almost too perfect to believe. Others emphasized the contrast: a supposedly devout Catholic man, respected in society, committing what looked like a calculated mass murder. Within days, conspiracy theories exploded across online forums. Had the family been assassinated? Was this linked to organized crime? Could they have staged their deaths? In Nantes, flowers were left at the gates of the family home. Teachers and classmates of the children were devastated. The school's flag flew at half-mast. But the intensity of the coverage also raised questions. Why did the media publish personal letters sent to relatives? Why were graphic details about the bodies revealed so quickly? Was this truly journalism, or exploitation? Some journalists defended the coverage, saying the public had a right to know. Others argued that turning tragedy into a spectacle only deepened the suffering of those left behind. And as the case gained international attention, headlines appeared in The Guardian, CNN, Der Spiegel, and Le Monde, each with a different angle. One thing was clear: Xavier had not only shaken his own family, he had shocked an entire country, and beyond. And the story wasn't just about murder anymore. It had become a national obsession. To understand what might have driven Xavier Dupont de Ligonnès to commit an act so devastating, investigators, journalists, and psychologists have all tried to answer one simple question: who was he, really? Born into a family of French aristocrats, Xavier was raised in an environment steeped in tradition, appearances, and high expectations. His full name, Xavier Pierre-Marie Dupont de Ligonnès, carried weight, not just socially, but emotionally. He was taught that status mattered, that dignity mattered, that the family name must never be stained. He studied engineering. He spoke English fluently. He even lived for a time in the United States, where he met Agnès, his future wife. They settled in France, raised 4 children: Arthur, Thomas, Anne, and Benoit, and presented, at least outwardly, the image of a stable Catholic household. But beneath the surface, there were fractures. Xavier had multiple failed business ventures. He lived beyond his means, driving expensive cars, staying in hotels, and trying to maintain the illusion of success, even as his debts grew deeper. He borrowed money from friends and family. He used his wife's inheritance. He quietly lost control. Yet he kept smiling. By all accounts, he was charming, even soft-spoken. He was active in religious groups. He wrote long, thoughtful emails to friends. He never lost his temper. But something dark was growing inside him, a sense of collapse, of shame, of no way out. Some psychologists believe Xavier exhibited signs of narcissistic personality disorder, particularly vulnerable narcissism, a fragile ego masked by confidence, easily wounded by failure. Others suggest a paranoid delusion, shaped by stress and humiliation, in which the only escape from perceived disgrace was to destroy the very image he could no longer uphold. There were no documented episodes of violence, no history of abuse, no direct warning signs. And perhaps that's the most disturbing part. Xavier was not a monster in the eyes of those around him. He was a father, a friend, a neighbor. He wrote poetry. He cooked family dinners. He told his daughter bedtime stories. And yet, one day, he made a decision. A decision that would erase everything. A man who feared humiliation more than death. A man who believed that ruin was worse than murder. A man who vanished, not just from the world, but from the person he had always pretended to be. Before diving deeper into the many theories surrounding this case, it's important to pause for a moment, to shift the focus away from Xavier and toward the people whose lives were tragically lost, leaving behind echoes of what they once were. At the center of the family was Agnès, aged 48. She trained as a laboratory technician, but devoted her life to raising her children. Friends remembered Agnès as deeply religious, soft-spoken, and meticulous. The type of woman who sang in choir at the local church, volunteered at school events, and made sure meals were ready even when finances were stretched. In private, Agnès confided to close friends about feeling increasingly isolated, concerned that Xavier seemed distant and that their marriage was fraying under mounting pressure. Her eldest was Ardor, aged 20. He was not Xavier's biological son. Agnès had him from a previous relationship, and Xavier adopted him when Ardor was around 2 years old. He completed a technological baccalaureate, focused on science and industrial technology, and was studying for an IT diploma at St. Gabriel in Vade while working evenings at a pizzeria in Nantes to support himself. Friends said Arthur was responsible, independent, and talented. Next came Thomas, 18 years old, quiet, polite, and passionately musical. He earned a baccalaureate in literature and pursued musicology studies at the Catholic University of the West in Angers, living in the St. Aubin residence hall. When Xavier called him home that April, Thomas didn't hesitate. He returned without knowing it would be for the last time. Anne was 16, thoughtful and caring, with a love for animals and a gentle creativity. She attended the private law Perverie Sacré-Cœur in Nantes, participated in drama club, and often wrote stories in her spare time. Friends described Anne as considerate, artistic, and kind. The youngest, Benoit, was only 13. Cheerful and imaginative, he served as an altar boy at St. Felix Church and loved drums and video games. Teachers recalled Benoit as a boy full of energy, who smiled often and asked deep questions about the world. To outsiders, the Dupont de Ligonnès family seemed ordinary, respectful, discreet, and close. Neighbors waved. Teachers praised the children. There were no visible signs of distress, no frequent arguments, no red flags. And yet, beneath this calm exterior, something was quietly unraveling. Perhaps the cruelest irony of this tragedy is that everything appeared normal, until the moment it wasn't. After the discovery of the bodies and the disappearance of Xavier Dupont de Ligonnès, the world was left with one overwhelming question: why? What could possibly drive a man, a father, to murder his entire family and vanish without a trace? Many investigators and journalists believe that Xavier planned the murders meticulously, down to the smallest detail. They point to the suppressors ordered online, the staged farewell letters, the deletion of family photos from social media, and the well-timed withdrawal of the children from school. The family's 2 Labradors were also killed, a detail that suggests, to some, a cold and calculated attempt to erase all attachments before executing the plan. Financial ruin is often cited as the most likely motive. At the time of the murders, Xavier was drowning in debt. His business ventures had failed, his father's inheritance was gone, and he had been lying to both his family and the people around him for years, pretending to work for an American intelligence agency, living a double life. Some see this as the unraveling of a man who could no longer maintain the illusion of control. But others argue this wasn't just about money. Agnes, his wife, had reportedly confided in friends about marital problems and Xavier's growing coldness. She had even consulted a divorce lawyer in the months before her death. For some, this raises the possibility of an honor crime, a term usually reserved for cultures far from suburban France. But here, it suggests a man who may have felt that his family's existence, or the prospect of public shame, had to be erased for his name to remain intact. Then comes the question of whether Xavier may have taken his own life after the murders. If he did that, why was his body never found? The final confirmed sighting placed him in Roquebrune-sur-Arzon, where he left his car at a hotel parking lot on April 15, 2011. Surveillance footage shows him walking calmly, with no indication of despair. No body, no weapon, no suicide note was ever found. The area was searched extensively, caves, woods, cliffs, but nothing surfaced. Could he have staged his own death? Some investigators believe Xavier planned to disappear. His calm demeanor during his final days, the stops at budget hotels under his real name, and the fact that he left behind no digital trace, no phone, no credit card use, all point to someone who may have meticulously planned an escape. He had connections abroad, particularly in the United States and South America. It's possible he used false documents, altered his appearance, and slipped away just far enough to be invisible. Then there's the question of complicity. Could someone have helped him, a friend, a relative, someone who owed him loyalty? While no evidence directly supports this, the sheer smoothness of his disappearance, the lack of any sightings in over a decade, and the fact that he managed to vanish without help from modern technology, raise eyebrows. It's hard to disappear in the 21st century. But not impossible, especially if you've been planning it for years. Other theories venture into the realm of the psychological. Xavier was reportedly obsessed with religion and honor. He saw himself as the protector of his family, perhaps even their savior. In this twisted logic, ending their lives may have felt like a warped act of mercy, to save them from disgrace or future poverty. This type of distorted moral reasoning isn't new in familicide cases, and psychiatrists have often pointed to narcissistic traits in similar killers. To this day, law enforcement is split. Some believe he is dead, buried in the remote hills of southern France. Others are convinced he is alive, that he had help, and that he planned his new identity far in advance. Occasionally, tips come in, sightings in Italy, in Chicago, in Thailand, but none have led to anything conclusive. What remains is a haunting vacuum, a man-shaped shadow left in the wake of a destroyed family, and a nation still searching for answers. In the aftermath of the tragic discovery at 55 Boulevard Robert Schumann, the French authorities launched one of the most extensive and complex investigations in the country's recent history. But despite their efforts, the disappearance of Xavier Dupont de Ligonnès would quickly reveal cracks in the system, missed opportunities, human errors, and public frustration. The police initially treated the case as a disappearance rather than a crime. When Agnès and the children were first reported absent from school and work, authorities hesitated to intervene. It wasn't until April 21st, nearly 2 weeks after the family was last seen, that officers obtained permission to enter the house. What they found was nothing at all. The home appeared clean, undisturbed, eerily normal. There were no immediate signs of struggle. But then came a strange odor in the garden. Beneath the terrace, hidden under layers of gravel and cement, they found 5 lifeless bodies, Agnès, and the 4 children, Arthur, Thomas, Anne, and Benoit. Each had been carefully wrapped in blankets and placed side by side, along with religious symbols, candles, and crosses. Shockingly, the police had been to the house 4 times before this discovery, and never once had they searched the garden. This failure caused a national uproar. How could something so important, so horrifying, be missed? By the time Xavier became the prime suspect, he was already gone. Investigators traced his movements across southern France using surveillance footage and hotel receipts. Between April 11th and 15th, Xavier stayed in small motels, used his real name, paid in cash, and behaved calmly. In Roquebrune-sur-Arzon, he abandoned his car and vanished on foot. Police scoured the surrounding terrain, woods, hills, caves, but found nothing. Not a trace. No clothing. No bag. No remains. No farewell message. At the time, many believed that Xavier had chosen to disappear forever, or that he may have taken irreversible steps once out of sight. But as days turned into weeks, then months, then years, the lack of closure fueled speculation, frustration, and even conspiracy. The public was critical of the investigation. Some claimed the police had failed to act fast enough. Others believed the media coverage had compromised the manhunt, broadcasting Xavier's photo and movements before police could intervene. There were even rumors that Xavier had received help, that someone had given him money, shelter, or forged documents. Yet no one was ever charged with aiding his disappearance. Over the years, thousands of tips have poured in. People claim to have seen him in Italy, Scotland, Canada, Chicago, even Thailand. In 2019, a man was arrested at the airport in Glasgow, believed to be Xavier. But after several hours, fingerprint analysis confirmed he was not. The news spread like wildfire, only to dissolve into another dead end. Forensics didn't offer much more clarity. The bullets used were .22 caliber, the same type fired by the rifle registered in Xavier's name. But the weapon itself was never recovered. The suppressors he had purchased online were found in the home, and traces of sleeping medication were discovered in the victims' bodies, suggesting that they had been sedated before the fatal act. This pointed once again to a premeditated plan. Yet despite these findings, no definitive timeline has ever been established. How exactly Xavier managed to carry out the act without alerting neighbors remains a mystery. Some experts believe the killings may have been spaced over multiple nights. Others suggest the family may have trusted him so completely that no one suspected anything. In the end, the investigation, while extensive, remains open, with more questions than answers. A red notice from Interpol is still active. But without a body, a confirmed sighting, or a confession, the case of Xavier Dupont de Ligonnès continues to haunt investigators, the media, and the French public. When the tragedy at 55 Boulevard Robert Schumann became public, the French media reacted with a wave of shock and obsession. Within hours of the discovery of the bodies, the case of Xavier Dupont de Ligonnès dominated headlines across the country. It wasn't just the horror of the crimes, it was the mystery, the silence, and the sudden disappearance of the man believed to have committed them. The case became front-page news in Le Parisien, Libération, France Info, TF1, and France 2. Rolling updates followed every move of the investigation, from the discovery of Xavier's car at a budget hotel in the south, to blurry CCTV images and rumors of sightings in Italy or even Scotland. Journalists gathered outside the family's empty home, cameras rolled 24/7, and even local neighbors found themselves under media scrutiny. The home on Boulevard Robert Schumann transformed from an ordinary residence into a national symbol of hidden darkness. But the interest didn't stop at daily news coverage. Online, the case took on a life of its own. French forums like Doctissimo and Zovideo.com, along with Reddit threads in English, became home to amateur investigators who dissected timelines, analyzed receipts, and speculated endlessly. Every clue, real or imagined, was debated. Did Xavier escape abroad? Was he hiding in plain sight? Had he taken his own life, leaving behind the perfect vanishing act? Theories spread faster than facts, and the line between journalism and fiction began to blur. This media storm soon inspired filmmakers and authors. In 2015, a French psychological thriller titled Un homme idéal was released. Though officially fictional, its plot, a man assuming another identity to escape failure, closely mirrored the Ligonnès story. The public recognized the parallels instantly. While some saw it as disrespectful, others welcomed it as a way to keep the case alive in the public's mind. By 2019, serious journalism returned to the spotlight. The French magazine Society published a landmark two-part investigative special, over 70 pages long, tracing every detail of the case with journalistic rigor and psychological depth. This reporting became a cult sensation. Readers lined up for physical copies. The magazine sold out and had to be reprinted. For many, it marked a turning point, a shift from media frenzy to thoughtful inquiry. Meanwhile, the case continued to haunt the cultural imagination. French television produced a series of documentaries, each revisiting the investigation with varying tones. Programs such as Enquête criminelle, Chronique criminelle, and Non élucidé dedicated entire episodes to the case. In 2020, M6 released Un homme ordinaire, a dramatized miniseries loosely inspired by Xavier's story, with changed names but unmistakable echoes of the real events. Public interest had not faded, it had evolved. Books followed too. One of the most notable came from Xavier's own sister, Christine Dupont de Ligonnès, who published Xavier Mon frère présumé innocent, or My Brother, Presumed Innocent. In the book, she paints a different picture of her brother. Not as a monster or a coward, but as a victim of a system that misunderstood him. While controversial, the memoir revealed the emotional weight the case had left on the family that remained. Another book, The Greatest Psychopath of Recent Crime, written by Thomas Lun, offered a darker take, diving into Xavier's potential psychological disorders and the possibility that the crimes had been premeditated long before the act itself. Even after more than a decade, the case remains unresolved. But its legacy is clear. It has become one of the most analyzed, debated, and retold true crime stories in modern European history. Through documentaries, dramatizations, podcasts, books, and endless speculation, Xavier Dupont de Ligonnès became not just a suspect, but a myth, a symbol of disappearance, denial, and the secrets we hide behind polished facades. And yet, amid all this noise, 5 people are gone. Agnès, Arthur, Thomas, Anne, and Benoit. Each with dreams, friendships, voices, now silenced. In the end, the fascination with Xavier must never eclipse the tragedy of those lives lost. Sometimes, when we hear about cases like this, shocking, tragic, and unsolved, it's easy to focus entirely on the mystery, on the person who disappeared, or on the many unanswered questions. But what stays with me most is not the mystery itself. It's the silence that followed. The silence of 5 futures that were stolen. Agnès was a mother, a teacher, a woman of faith who believed in family and routine. Arthur was on the cusp of adulthood, studying hard, building dreams of his own. Thomas had a deep love for music. Anne was just 16, bright and full of life. Benoit was the youngest, only 13, still discovering the world. We'll never know who they could have become, what they might have created, achieved, or loved. Their lives were cut short in complete stillness, and the world never got to see them grow. That's what haunts me most. In the end, we are left with questions. Was this the act of a desperate man? A carefully planned escape? Or something else entirely? We may never have the answers. But what we do have is the responsibility to remember the victims not just as names in a headline, but as individuals whose stories were abruptly stopped. If this video made you pause, think, or feel something, please consider subscribing to the channel. I'm working on more deep dive stories like this one, where we explore the cases that leave behind more than just headlines. And if you feel like supporting this kind of content, a like or a comment goes a long way in helping more people discover it. Thank you for watching. And thank you for remembering them with me.